There are a lot of watches coming out right now, and some are getting more attention than others. So if you can't be bothered to hunt them all down, I've done the hard work for you. Here they are, the 10 hottest watches right now. The last one comes right at the very end. The most satisfying jobs are the ones that require little effort but yield great reward. Like redesigning the MasterCard logo or the Ghost Wipe. For Tudor, it was updating their masterful Black Bay chronograph to have a pink dial. Why pink? First, let's talk about the extra hole. Before you call this watch lazy, it actually took a lot of effort to get it right. It used to be a bit meh, but then they inverted a few layers in Photoshop and now it looks alright. Making a chronograph movement was effort, so they nicked one from Breitling. That had 3 subdials, but the Tudor didn't, so they binned one of the wheels and now there's a jewel in there with a wheel missing. Took literally hours of work. And then someone accidentally stuck a red sock in with a batch of the white dials and now they have this. I know it wasn't on purpose because you know how when people lie, they make up too much detail. Well, you might think the inspiration for this watch was something straightforward like the pink ribbon foundation or something like that, but no. It's the colour that, according to the press material, Tudor ambassador Jay Shu owns. I've been using a pink highlighter for ages and I didn't realise I was supposed to be paying him royalties. It's also the colour of the Giro d'Italia frontrunner's jersey, the shade of a freshly shaved leg. It's a cycling thing and Tudor's been officially timing it. Oh, and it's also the colour of the American football team Inter Miami, led by Tudor ambassador David Beckham. That's American football as in a football team in America, not the sport played almost entirely without the feet or a ball. Like every good piece of modern art, that's the reasoning they came up with after making it. Tudor refers to the pink shade as being daring and bold and not for everyone, and so naturally it's the hottest thing since the McDonald's apple pie. Thankfully, Tudor states that only a small number of examples will be produced, which will ensure that everyone isn't daring and bold at the same time. The watch is otherwise identical, however the price has gone up £90 over the £4,790 of the standard version to cover the cost of the red sock, and despite not being for everyone, is already floating around on the secondary market at over £40,000. Now that's daring and bold. Oh look, it's Tudor again, and this time instead of being partially related to cycling, it's locking in those SPDs and is fully committed to the self-propelled sport. This is the Pelagos FXD Chrono, first introduced in black carbon composite with blue themes for the Alinghi America's Cup yacht team, returning here for the unambiguous FXD Chrono Cycling Edition. Let's break that down. The Pelagos is to Tudor what the Sea Dweller would be to Rolex if people actually still needed them. It's an alternate reality where mechanical watches continued development to fulfill a modern need, like titanium horseshoes or, very topical, a carbon fibre bicycle. It's a dive watch series, and in 2021 received the addition of the FXD, a contraction of fixed that unfortunately doesn't refer to the pricing structure. And yes, it has been that long since the first FXD, even though it only feels like last year. The big wow factor of the FXD was the inability to use any other strap than a NATO. With the spring bars not just permanently affixed but actually part of the case, the setup was designed in conjunction with the French Armed Forces to make the watch exceptionally secure during operations, since the French Armed Forces have a lot of experience losing things. And why not add that Kosk chronograph caliber from the Black Bay Chrono too? But the cycling edition isn't just a reissue of the Alinghi team in spandex and swooshy glasses. It's been completely reconfigured to make more sense on the wrist of a pro bicycler. The dive bezel has gone and in its place is a 60-second scale with a tachymeter on the broader chapter ring. But this is no ordinary tachymeter because its red rings loop around the dial 3 times so as to be able to go all the way down to 20, the ideal speed for holding up traffic. It doesn't go any lower though, so owners won't be able to stop at a red light or zebra crossings. Along with Rafa's finest spray-painted apparel, a cyclist is looking for any advantage to reduce the weight of their steed to make the most streamlined and efficient progress to the chip shop and back. So Tudor has continued that trend with a 43mm forged carbon fibre case that weighs as much as the tatters of Lance Armstrong's career. Price comes in at £4,560, an investment kept secured to the wrist by a fetching strap in seatbelt black. The 2024 season hasn't been the best for French F1 team Alpine, whose car, in the hands of drivers Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, has been slower than when Cedric the Slug slipped into a steel stop sign. And you might be asking what the point of the team is if it can't perform, and the answer is one. One lonely point for the Alpine team. It's not all failed crash tests and overweight chassis, however, because dropping out of quali early gives the drivers more chance to admire their new wristwear, the H. Moser C Streamliner Cylindrical Tourbillon Skeleton Alpine Limited Edition. A name so long, it's how Alpine now measures lap time. The pair is divided, much like the car, between the team's blue and sponsor BWT's pink. F1 is not only an entertaining way to spend a Sunday afternoon nap, but also a haven of advertising from companies no one has ever heard of. So if you're wondering, BWT sells water treatment systems, which is ideal for cooling off all those sick burns Alpine have been getting. The Streamliner Cylindrical Tourbillon Skeleton combines Moser's slick Streamliner case with the open-worked caliber HMC 811, which has a tourbillon fitted with an impressive cylindrical hairspring. Seen rarely and only in pocket watches, whose bigger springs made the spherification easier, its presence here acts as a way for Moser to brag that it makes its own hairsprings, one of only a handful of watchmakers who do, and can make them any way it likes. Not only is each watch clad in a rubber strap of either hue, the hour and minute subdials get the sapphire treatment in matching colours too. If the drivers suffer another engine failure on the far side of a remote track like Spa, they can at least break the glass and sustain themselves with an emergency boiled sweet while they wait. Bet you didn't notice the pink one gets blued hands and tourbillon bridge as well. This £78,000 watch gets 74 hours of power reserve, maintained by the spindly rose gold rotor weight, and is sealed to 120 meters, with the blue limited to 100 pieces and the pink just 20, to keep them daring and bold. Philip Toledano is many things. He's an artist, and a successful one, which immediately makes me suspicious. Everyone knows artists are only allowed to be successful once they're dead. He's also in a long-distance relationship with a man from Hong Kong called Alfred Chan, and that's the second thing he is, a watch designer. Between himself and Alfred, they collaboratively designed the Toledano and Chan B1 without ever being in the same room. I know what you're thinking. How can they possibly collaborate spontaneously or foster any kind of working culture when they don't have to suffer the drudgery of physically getting to the same place? I too was baffled, knowing full well that, in just the same way a still camera steals your soul, a webcam steals your ability to work collaboratively and productively. This point is proven in the extremely simplistic lines of the B1, clearly the work of two men sapped of all creative agency by the restrictive confines of a 1080p window. They couldn't even make it symmetrical. Inspired, in the words of Mr. Toledano himself, by brutalist architecture and minimalist 1970s design, the watch brings to mind the 1962 Rolex King Midas, a watch that prominently featured the deep blue hue of lapis lazuli in its dial. The B1 also features a blue lapis lazuli dial as well, but that's inspired by brutalist architecture and minimalist 1970s design. The B1 styling picks up where the Rolex left off by adding an additional lifted crease on the angled side of the bracelet, creating a series of trapezoidal prisms from link to link and into the case itself, which rises up to accommodate the Sellita SW100 caliber inside. It's a nod to the Marcel Breuer building in New York, which has a window that's formed the basis of the B1's case. The next watch will be called the Velux. The brushed finish is stark and brutalist, and unlike the Rolex, goes from left to right instead of right to left, and was realised in physical form, once Philip's ideas had arrived by carrier pigeon, by Alfred through his connections in China. It's a tiny watch, much smaller than expected at 33.5mm across, with the markerless dial set with two blade-like hands. But don't let that fool you, because the most brutal thing about this watch is the price. $4,000. As Bubba Deep Singh said to Genghis Khan, "No, you're the brutalist." The future is now. Well, actually, the past is. But back in 1976, when flabbergasted onlookers first laid eyes on the Amida Digitrend, the future really was now. Then. This was a watch unlike any seen before, that dared to lift the time from its habitual resting place of the last few centuries and angle it slightly towards the viewer. This was the era of Star Wars, Alien, and, well, Future World was there too, I guess. Man had walked on the moon, and now anything was possible, even angling a watch display slightly towards the viewer. It was actually the least high-tech watch going, since many of the other manufacturers had gravitated towards the sci-fi future of LEDs instead of the old-school mechanical solution. And so by 1979, Amida had to hang up its tiny screwdrivers and call it a day. Why did it fail? Well, Amida was really a manufacturer of cheap generic watches, and the Digitrend was a cheap generic rip-off of the fancier LED frontrunners. They didn't have the budget to figure out an electronic solution, so they bodged it with mechanical instead. By today's rose-tinted standards, it's actually rather elegant. 2 discs, printed with the hours and minutes, spin about on the dial as you might expect, parallel with the movement itself. That image is then lifted up and bent towards our curious viewer by means of a Pink Floyd favourite, the prism. It's like a little periscope for the watch, presenting a splendid display of the hours and minutes beneath the shaded hood of the sleek case, which protects the display from glare, keeping it readable. You might at this point be thinking, this looks an awful lot like the MB&F HM5, and you'd be right. That watch was Max's homage to this plucky little ticker, and although many of us wouldn't mind Max's slinky sports car on our wrists, it's priced a little too far out of reach for most of us. That the Amida Digitrend has been revived then will be welcome news to those who have 2,900 Swiss francs to spend, because that's how much it costs. The 39 by 39.6mm case, 15.6mm at its tallest, 6mm where it tails off, houses not a Solita, but a sop rod, with a custom module sat on top to jiggle all the bits and bobs into the right place. Where the minutes trail along continuously, the hours are of the jumping variety, snicking from one to the next so it's always centered. So you can be sure, when dropping the kids off at space school in your hover car, that you'll never miss a beat. Imagine a world where a watch was designed that wasn't just a copy of something else. What would that watch look like? Perhaps something like this, the Kolloquium Projekt 01, which instead of drawing inspiration from the world of horology, seeks it instead by sitting too close to the television. The Projekt 01 is the work of founders Manuel Emch, Bart Nussbaumer and Amir Sindi, whose names I've most certainly given the full Jackson Pollock, who did the impossible and finally realised a watch that looks exactly how a hotel bed feels. That's 468 hand-painted and hand-applied pins set into the dial, representing the hours in relief in a way familiar to anyone who spent any time in a museum gift shop. It might initially seem disappointing that the pins are fixed in place and the watch can't be used to project other objects in relief, but we all know what you do with it, and I think it's for the best that you can't. Skimming the surface are 3 hands outlined in the same luminescent paint as the pins, with the second hand reminiscent of other fun family outing favourite, the wire buzzer game. If it reminds you of a tent peg instead, then you had what's known by psychiatrists as a miserable childhood. But the Imagineering doesn't stop there, because not only is the triangle crown breaking down barriers, the case is too, cast instead of machined, just like an internal combustion engine piston, which is why it looks like an internal combustion engine piston. On the side is demarcated KPNO01, which, when you forget what the watch is actually called, will at least give you something to Google. The whole thing feels somehow both familiar in its simplicity but also completely unique, and wearing it makes you feel like a plumber from Tron. Thankfully, it's just 38.5mm in diameter and 10.6mm thick, so won't need a wrist pin to hold it in place. There's no peeping at the La Joux-Perret caliber G101 as the caseback is solid, lending it a feel of solidity like you could comfortably hammer a nail in with it. The watch is being released in small runs of different colours for 2,666 Swiss francs, and is actually very cool and I like it very much. I wish I was brave enough to get one. At the age of 15, he began his apprenticeship at Patek Philippe. If there was ever a line that had the word genius written all over it, it's that one. Like, check this one out. By the age of 5, he could read and write music. By the age of 6, he was writing his first compositions. That one's Mozart. And this one, at the age of 6, he was able to joke with his father in classical Greek. Mathematician John von Neumann, father of game theory. You get the idea. Anyone whose legacy begins with the phrase, "at the age of," is destined for great things. And it's no surprise that 15-year-old Patek Philippe apprentice Rexhep Rexhepi turned out to be a horological genius. His first brand, Acrivia, came to be in 2012, where he thought he'd get up to speed with a simple tourbillon monopusher chronograph. In 2018, he signed his first watch under his own name, and in 2024 he sold a unique piece at the only watch auction, the Chronomètre Antimagnétique, for 2.1 million Swiss francs. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds like FP Journe levels of price insanity. And given the FP Journe up for sale alongside it also fetched 2 million, your hunch would be right. Before starting his own brand, Rexhep worked for none other than Mr. Francois-Paul Journe himself, and there he learned the singularly most important art of watchmaking: how to make cool shit. Journe's ability to create watches that make you ponder parenticide to get your inheritance early has clearly rubbed off onto Rexhep, and for the Chronomètre Antimagnétique, he's kicked it into overdrive. What makes the Chronomètre Antimagnétique so special? It's hard to put a finger on it. Maybe it's the distinctly unique interpretation of historic scientific chronometers in black Grand Fouet enamel. Perhaps it's the removable caseback that gives the watch its antimagnetic properties, indicated by the tiny lightning bolt. Or it could be the beautifully symmetric caliber with its zero reset hacking seconds. It's probably the obscene amount of investment potential, to be honest, but those other things are really cool too. It feels strange to be alive during a renaissance of the finest independent handmade watches at the same time as the first ever jetpack race, but that's the future for you. They thought the future was in 1976, but that was then. This is now. The future, I mean. Oh, forget it. Apparently, Rexhepis are a lot like buses, because following in Rexhep's footsteps is his younger brother Xhevdet. If being the at the age of 15 guy is one end of the spectrum, being the younger brother of the at the age of 15 guy automatically places you at the other. It's not the worst thing in the world to be the sibling or child of a very successful person, but it's surely a challenge, requiring twice the effort to emerge from under a very large shadow, and that's what Xhevdet has set out to do. He was encouraged by his older brother to try out at Patek like he did, and he wowed them by breezing through the training at a level that far exceeded the other applicants. By the time he'd finished his apprenticeship, Acrivia was already established, and so he went to help his brother for 7 years, at which point he decided it was time to fully emerge with his own self-titled brand. You have to go big or go home when you step out from Acrivia to do your own thing, and that was exactly Xhevdet's intention. The watch, the Minute Inerte, not only took the chronometer design in an unusual new direction, featuring a tiny spoon about the perfect size for a small amount of substance, but the real meat's in the movement. You'll see, peering through the opened sub-second counter, a little more going on than you'd expect for a straightforward watch, and that's because it's as simple as getting a dinner order out of my wife. Those of you capable of rearranging words will have noticed that Minute Inerte means inert minute, and at the passing of every 60 seconds, the everything about it does indeed become inert. The second hand freezes for a few seconds, then the minute hand jumps forwards to the next marker, and then the second hand catches up again and continues along its way. A better question perhaps than how is why? Well, it all stems from the precision timing of Swiss trains and the design icon that is the Swiss railway clock. Basically, the Swiss were getting sick of trains leaving a few seconds late because of the reaction times of the driver. Having experienced the UK train network, I can relate. The reaction times of drivers here can be a good 2-3 hours sometimes. And so the Swiss train peeps devised a clock that, at 58.5 seconds, skipped ahead to the next minute and paused there for a second and a half. It was a close call, but lives were changed that day. But the major benefit was that the 1.5 second pause gave every clock at every station the opportunity to electronically sync every minute, keeping the entire Swiss network as one. A rule had been put in place that trains would only leave at the top of the minute, placing extreme importance on its accuracy. That's why the Swiss train clock has a red circle at the end of its second hand. It's like the conductor's baton telling the train to leave. Okay, so maybe that's not a spoon, it's a baton. But in any case, it's this fascinating mechanism that Xhevdet sought to replicate in the Minute Inerte. We're still back to why, but try not to be such a sourpuss about it. The how is far more interesting, and it's a question Xhevdet has been trying to answer for the last few years. And we've all been staring over his shoulder like the unhelpful Jesus meme, trying to see how he's getting on. He's close apparently, and that's got wallets twitching to the tune of around 80,000 Swiss francs. Picture the scene. You're in a bank heist and it goes wrong. Johnny's late with the getaway vehicle and the police arrive. Your face is covered, but they get a glance of your watch. It's got Roman numerals. Damn, busted. But wait, all is not lost. You step out the back, whip off the mask, light a cigarette, and twist the crown of the Byrne gyro dial Meca. The Roman numerals disappear in a flash, replaced by plain baton markers. The police rush out after you. They see you and they round up on you. They've got their man. But wait, they glance at your watch and take a beat. Have you seen a man with Roman numerals on his watch? They say. You shrug. No, you reply, taking a drag of your cigarette, not breaking eye contact. The officer is clearly on the back foot. Okay, well, you be careful, he says as he leads his troops on. There's a bank robber on the loose. You live to fight another day. That is exactly what I think the people at Byrne were imagining when they designed the gyro dial Meca, a watch with 4 personalities thanks to the rotating cubes at 12, 3, 6 and 9. Wait until midnight, or if you're showing off to your friends or trying to justify the cost to your partner, twist the crown, and you'll be treated to a selection of either Roman numerals, baton markers, Arabic numerals, also known simply as numbers, in white on steel or polished blue. The gyro has existed since 2022, with the dial mechanism exposed in 2023, and now refined in 2024 with a smaller hand-wound version with a semi-skeletonized movement created for Byrne by Le Temps Manufacture. Remember how Heuer moved the crown of its chronograph to the left as a reminder the automatic caliber didn't need winding? Well, Byrne has kind of done the opposite, tucking the crown awkwardly between the lugs so 1. You can't get a third-party strap for it without getting the Stanley knife out, and 2. Winding it is more uncomfortable than when you say, "Hey, how are you?" to someone and they say, "Fine, you?" and you say, "Good, you?" Making up for that awkward exchange is the case, a blend of sculpted sections in polished and blasted finishes, the concave bezel scooping upwards like your mouth when you try to find the straw. The size has shrunk down from just under 42mm to a more universally wearable and trend-appropriate 38mm tall by 36mm wide, although the price has grown to 25,000 Swiss francs. I know I've mentioned it before already, but since the tag Heuer F1 Kith is hotter than a bag of fresh dog shit right now, I couldn't not include it. Also, I want to shout at it again because now they're appearing for sale on the open market, and the results aren't quite what we expected. Quick recap for those not in the know. Tag Heuer, formerly Heuer, died a horrible death in the 1980s when more advanced technology took over. Holding company Tag bought Heuer, renamed it Tag Heuer, and released a cheap as chips new tech watch called the Formula 1 in a bunch of flashy colours to make the business profitable again. Well, history has a way of repeating itself, and in a bid to make Tag Heuer relevant again, the cheapy Formula 1 has been brought out of retirement. Except this time it's far from cheapy. There are 10 watches total, limited anywhere from 250 to 1,350 pieces for a total of around 5,000, and they cost a butt-puckering £1,350. Here's the interesting part. The big argument for the cost was the resale value, so naturally eBay is already flooded with them. But they aren't going for multiples of RRP. Some of them are a few hundred over, max 500, but others, and not even the least exclusive, are selling at just £50 or so above the original price. I think it's time to crack out the smug grin. Those are the hottest, most talked about watches right now. What are your favourites? Did I miss something you think is even hotter? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and an even bigger thank you goes to my amazing Patreons, who you can join via the link in the description. And remember, if you ever use ChatGPT, don't forget to say thank you so you're spared come the rise of the machines. See you all in the salt mines.